Okay, class, let's review what we talked about yesterday about adding and subtracting mixed numbers. If you remember, the first two questions that we had were just adding simple fractions together. And we know that we go through a 5-step process when we add them together or subtract them. The first thing we must do is find a common denominator. Then we must change our numerator to match. Whatever I did to my bottom number, I must do to the top number as well. Then I'm ready to add or subtract my numerators or my top numbers. Then I'm going to keep my new denominator. Whatever that denominator was, I'm going to keep that. And then last but not least, we're going to simplify. So let's see if we can review how to add these. So we start with our 8 and our 12, where we need to find a common denominator. Like I told you yesterday, the easiest way to do that is you start with the biggest denominator you have, and you go through the multiples of that number until the other one will go into 1. So here we have 12. 12 times 1 is 12. Can I turn the 8 into a 12 by multiplying? No. 12 times 2, 24. Can I turn the 8 into a 24? Yes, I can. So that becomes my common denominator. Now the next step is to change our numerators. Well, what did I do to this 8 to turn it to a 24? Well, I multiplied it by 3. So if I multiply it by 3, I have to multiply the top number by 3 as well. 3 times 3 is 9. So 3/8 and 9/24 are what we call equivalent fractions. They state the same ratio. So what did I do to the 12 to turn it to a 24? I multiplied it by 2, so I multiply the 5 by 2 as well. So 5 times 2 is 10. So now we have 9 24s and we have 10 24s. So how many 24s do we have all together? 19 24s. So our process is very simple. Find a common denominator, change your numerator, add your numerators, keep your denominator, and then simplify. And then 19 over 24 couldn't simplify. Subtraction, we do the same thing. It's just instead of adding the numerators, we subtract them. So here we have a 4/5, take away 2/3. So we find our common denominator. 5 and 3, the first number they have in common is 15. So we rewrite our fractions with 15s on the bottom. And then we ask, what did I do to the 5 to turn it to a 15? I multiplied it by 3, so I do the same thing to the 4 to get a 12. What did I do to the 3 to turn it to a 15? I multiplied by 5, so I do the same to the 2 to get 10. Now these little multiples here, where we're multiplying these up here, the showing the process of finding a common denominator and all that, I don't have to see those numbers. If you can do those in your head, perfectly fine. If you still need to show them, that's okay as well. So here we now have 12 15s, take away 10 15s, so we should end up with 2 15s left. And 2 and 15 no longer have any common factor other than 1. So it's already simplified. So that's what we do with adding and subtracting fractions. Well, what do you think we would do if we had a mixed number? What's the only thing that I would add into the problem? Well, the only thing, we still have to do the same type thing. We still find a common denominator. We still find a common denominator. We still change our numerator to match. We still add or subtract our numerators. We still keep our new denominator. The only step we're going to add into the process is we need to add our whole numbers. And we should do that before we simplify, because sometimes when we simplify the fraction, we have to put something into the whole parts. So let's go back and try this one here. So now we've got 5 and 3/4 plus 6 and 5/8. First thing we have to do is find a common denominator. So we start with the 8 and we ask, can I turn the 4 into an 8 with multiplication? Yes, we can. So we rewrite the problem with 8 on the bottom. Now we change our numerators. What did I do to the 4 to turn it to an 8? Multiplied by 2, so I multiply the 3 by 2 to get 6. What did I do to this 8 to turn it into an 8? I multiplied by 1, or nothing at all, so I multiply the 5 by 1, and I still get 5. So now we're ready to add our numerators. Here I have 6, here I have 5, so we end up with 11, and there's still 8s, so it's 11/8, and now 5 and 6 make 11. Now this is a perfectly fine answer, except for the fact that this fraction is an improper fraction. So that tells us that we need to simplify this. And in order to simplify an improper fraction, we simply divide. Top in, bottom out. And we divide. And I don't need to see this division. If you can do it in your head, that's perfectly fine. But for those that need to, let's go ahead and do it. 8 divided by 11 goes one time. We subtract. You end up with 3. So I have no other numbers, and we're dealing with fractions. So this 3 goes as our numerator. The 8 goes as our denominator. And now we've got to take this and put it into this part over here. So we already have 11 parts, but then I have 1 3/8 that came out of this 11/8. So the 11 and the 1 go together to make a 12, and the only fraction part that I have left is 3/8, and I can't simplify it anymore. Now, all that stuff you should have already done last year. That part is just a review. Well, the 7th grade part, we start throwing in some other things, like maybe negatives, okay? Maybe negatives in there, okay? So let's see if we can do a negative problem, and then we'll come back and work on that subtraction problem, because it's going to be reviewed, the subtraction right here. So we've got 8 5/8 plus negative 3 1/2. So because this one is negative, what are we going to do with our fractions? We're still going to subtract them, okay? Because this one's a positive, this one's a negative, so we subtract. So we still find our common denominator, 8 something plus 3 and something. So 8 and 2, what's the first number that they have in common? 8. So we rewrite with 8 on the bottom. So this one, I don't have to do anything. But the second fraction, what did I do to the 2 to turn it to an 8? Multiplied it by 4. So I need to multiply this one by 4 as well. So 1 times 4 is 4. But this 3 here is actually, this 3 4/8 is actually a negative. So what are we going to do if our signs are different? We're actually going to subtract our numbers. Okay, so 5 take away 4 gives us 1. We keep our 8s because it's still that same denominator. And then 8 take away 3 gives us 5. Now what kind of an answer is that going to be? It's going to be positive, because the 8 in 5/8 has a greater absolute value than negative 3 4/8. So what we've talked about is adding and subtracting mixed numbers, and sometimes we throw negatives in. So if this other one was negative, if I had these two that were negative, then what would we do with them? We would actually have to add our numbers together. So we need to remember our fraction rules and our integer rules. And the fraction rules are: find a common denominator, change your numerator to match, add or subtract your numerators, keep your new denominator, add your whole parts and simplify. And then our integer rules, in addition, if there's an addition sign, both signs are positive or both signs are negative, we add our numbers. If our signs are different, we subtract them. Okay? It's as simple as that. So what I need for you to do today is complete the assignment that the substitute is going to pass out to you.